Hello again, Sandwich. I'm Greg Anderson. It is that time again for another riveting installment of Ask the Supt. And this is an episode that you're going to want to watch if you're a teacher in the district, a parent, even a non-parent in Sandwich. There's a little bit for everybody. So hit share on your social media link and share it with people because this is a good one. Look at this rundown that I put together. We're going to talk about data, DEI, the proposed budget, federal funding, building safety, building conditions, a whole lot of stuff to catch up. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest, Dr. Maruszczak. Hello, sir.
How are you?
I am doing good. It's been a while.
It has been, I think, at least 2-3 months in that ball.
I was talking to Paula. I thought it was December that we did our last one.
Might have been November. I'm not sure, though.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
I was on my private island, so I just wasn't accessible. So,
Well,
what are you
you're
doing?
you're kind of like, where in the world does Carmen Sandiego? Like, anytime, I don't go onto Facebook very frequently, but usually you're front and center on my feed.
Yeah.
With, some riveting foreign country or a bar scene or something to that effect.
Or the two are in the same place.
Exactly.
You never know. Hey, we've got a lot to cover. First thing I want to get into is that data breach.
Sure.
Tell me a little bit about that. What happened and where are we now?
Okay, so it is actually super timely that you're asking this question because literally this morning at like 7 a.m. I got an email from PowerSchool, as did, I think, all of our families and all of our staff. So the way I understand it is something in the ballpark of around December 20th, 22nd, PowerSchool noted that there had been a data breach and some outside actor had downloaded a whole ton of information.
Not just Sandwich.
Oh, this has been a nationwide, and technically you could say worldwide, because they also service some schools overseas. That some actor had downloaded information, and honestly, I think, PowerSchool was held hostage to a certain degree. And it is a little mind-blowing to me that in speaking to folks who are experts on cybersecurity, this has almost become like a price of doing business, so to speak, where the ransom is paid. So I can't speak to exactly what PowerSchool did or did not with regard to ransom, but they have notified all of their clients, us being one of them, that they have a high degree of certainty that what was downloaded has been deleted. I think a troubling piece of this is all of the clients, us included, were not notified of this breach until something like January 9th.
That could be about a 2-week period.
Correct. So as soon as we were notified, we did send out a notice to all staff and to all families, notifying them of the breach. I think the good news is there.
Did you lose your mind that you didn't know about this for 2 weeks after it happened?
It bothered me. I don't know if I'd go as far as to say I lost my mind. I think the problem is that this is becoming, unfortunately, a little too routine.
Yeah.
Bryce Harper, our technology director, very much was on top of things.
Yeah. He's a good guy.
Great guy.
Yeah.
Super, really, it does his job extremely well.
Yeah.
And we put out communication. I didn't get a single response from our families. We've put out a second email notifying that PowerSchool would be reaching out directly to staff and to families.
Okay.
They have contracted with Experian.
Yeah.
That Experian will do 2 years free of charge credit monitoring for everyone. The point that we made in our correspondence with families is realize some of the key personal identifiable information,
Yeah.
like Social Security numbers being the big one, the obvious one.
Right.
We don't collect that information.
So it wasn't even in your system.
Not even in our system.
Okay.
I've heard some, good questions. Parents concerned about particularly things like IEP data or medical data. The type of medical data that we would have would be, if a student has an allergy or something along those lines that we need to know about.
But it's the breadcrumb thing. It's like if someone's home address is on there, then they can chase you through, your phone records, and then your phone records to your credit card.
Yeah, and I think.
Are you confident that PowerSchool has an Experian and all of that the systems are in place to the best of your ability, protect this from happening again, protect your teachers and parents?
That's a great question. One of the pieces that they've said is they are hiring CrowdStrike to kind of do a postmortem on what happened and so on. And part of their correspondence is, these are some of the specific steps that we're taking to ensure that this does not happen again.
Yeah. Okay.
I do think that to a certain degree, we've become a little numb to this type of stuff because these breaches are happening so frequently. And, I know I'll get, an email from something like Bed Bath & Beyond or something and
what's wrong with Bed Bath & Beyond?
Well, they had a data breach, or Target or something to that extent.
I thought you had a pillow issue.
No, I do not.
Okay. All right. That's good. That would be concerning.
No, everything's good on that front. But, it happens. I think it's unfortunate. We do everything on our end locally to ensure that student data and staff data is highly protected.
Yeah. We have a really, Dave Sampson.
I do.
In town. Dave is a cybersecurity guy in his professional work.
Sure. He's actually, about a month or two ago, he presented to the superintendents. And, we touched base very, very briefly, but I remember as part of Dave's presentation to the superintendents, and it was kind of like one of those head scratcher moments about how often these ransom attacks are occurring. And with huge corporations, and trust me, PowerSchool is enormous, paying the ransom becomes like the price of doing business. It's kind of,
it's insane.
It is insane. And it's kind of like, I don't know if I'm just becoming an old guy or something, but wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's the place that we've arrived to.
Man, that's nuts. That's nuts. Let's switch gears. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. President Trump's executive orders on DEI, as well as the threat to undo the U.S. Department of Education, are radical moves that certainly has people out and about in coffee shops in America having a strong opinion one way or another. How does this impact, let's talk about the DEI executive orders. What does that do to you as superintendent as it relates to DEI in the schools? What do you change? What do you not change? What's your take on that?
My take on it is the work is the work. And the work that we've been doing within the district during my tenure as superintendent, and our three schools have DEIB committees, the B being belonging. That work will continue on. And again, we very thoughtfully and deliberately added the B piece because that's the heart of the matter, that we do everything that we can from a policy and practice perspective to ensure that every single child that's part of the Sandwich Public Schools and their families have a strong sense of belonging.
Yeah.
So we can get into, the merits of some specifics around what people like to have as trigger points with regard to culture wars. But I think if you were to look at the substantive work that is happening, it is around belonging. It is around ensuring that our schools are very much an inclusive space. It's kind of interesting. We're in the process of doing our a brand new 5-year strategic plan, and we actually had a half-day session, a team of 37 people at the high school yesterday, and I had to present a lot of data around, performance data, enrollment data, demographic data. I think it's hardly a surprise that at least the Sandwich Public Schools now are 86.5% white students. It's probably directly reflective of the demographics of our community.
Right.
However, we've got about 21% of our students receive special education services. These are students that have a diagnosed disability. When I think about inclusion, yes, there is the racial component, but the number one population that we need to be thinking about with respect to inclusion are students with disabilities.
Yeah.
So you're going to tell me because of an executive order that work is going to continue? No, it's not.
Yeah.
So I think most people are very fair-minded and reasonable about this type of work.
Yeah.
I don't mean to speak for the school committee. However, I think we have a school committee that, again, is highly functional and looks at it through a very fair and reasonably minded lens.
My concern or thought as I was reflecting on our conversation, I was thinking that you get these big, fat, sexy, hairy words, diversity, equity, inclusion, and then you get an executive order, and you get the president in his ways, and that lightning strike, that noise, if you will, lands in a community like ours, and you have people who think that is super cool. That's the way we got to do things. Good for the president. And I totally understand that. But I'm curious as to how that do you have parents that are thinking, okay, the president said it, so
PEI is now dead.
Get it out of here. I'm done hearing this. Have you heard that?
I have not heard that at all.
Teachers, do you think? Stop telling my kid about that because the president said.
I have not heard that from staff. I have not heard that from any community or family member. And again, I've had some colleagues in other districts get a little more granular in the sense that they feel like it's had a chilling effect.
Yeah.
I do worry about the dismantling of the Department of Education.
Right.
And
what worries you the most, Joe?
I think we don't get a considerable portion of our budget. I think it's something like 9% or a little under that come from federal entitlement grants. But the conventional wisdom is if the Department of Ed is dismantled, those funding programs would fall to other agencies, like Health and Human Services and so on. But realize things like Title I, which are entitlement funds for students living in poverty, or IDEA funds for special education students, still that's 9% of your budget. I answered this question to the FinCom earlier this month. The conventional wisdom is, disproportionately those federal funds go to red states. So if that funding is cut, it actually hurts the red states more than it does up north.
Oh, interesting.
So, I think the key piece in a lot of these very dramatic changes is you can't get emotional around some of the theatrics around this, and you have to look at policy and substantively, what does the policy mean locally?
Yeah.
And it goes back to, which is probably a good adage, all politics is local. And what affects us here in Sandwich the most are decisions that are made locally by our school committee, by our select board, and so on.
Right.
And again, as I've had since my first day on the job, I have a very high degree of comfort in those folks making sound and reasonable judgments for our kids.
Yeah. The Department of Education being dismantled, though, has more far-reaching impact for you than just federal funding.
It does from a policy perspective
Yeah.
as far as protection of rights. And if you think about things like civil rights or Section 504 of the Rehabilitative Act of 1973, those protections in place are overseen by the Department of Education.
Yeah. Yeah. Crazy times.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy
Little
times.
chaotic.
Little chaotic. Yeah, crazy time. Let's talk about, speaking of crazy, let's talk about your budget proposal.
Okay. Which is the antithesis of crazy, and in my humble opinion, is remarkably reasonable.
About 41 million. So the status of that is the school committee approved it.
Correct.
FinCom is still, as we're sitting here today, FinCom is still looking over after your presentation. Any takeaways from your FinCom discussions, your meeting? Any takeaways, questions asked, observations? How do you think that went?
I think, I realize it's approximately 41 million. It's a 2.7% increase over the current fiscal year. I think most people think it's a reasonable approach. It's a level services budget. Obviously, 3/4 of our budget are tied up in salaries. We're very much a people-driven organization. So I think, it's level services, but also consistent with my previous two budgets. It takes a long, hard look at staffing, and through attrition, it maintains our reasonable class sizes, but also has staffing that's commensurate with our enrollment.
So is that increase because
2.7%?
Is that staff?
For the most part, yeah, based upon, our contractual obligations of, collective bargaining agreements that were negotiated.
Right.
So,
any other area that bumped up that a parent maybe?
No, if you go to the budget document, really our increases overall for our salaries was something like 3.99%, and our expenses was actually a decrease over FY25, the current fiscal year.
Okay.
So, I think I'm going to be presenting before the FinCom a second time, March 11th, which will be much more focused on capital. The majority of their questions were, again, related to capital. I think some of the questions I received really were around enrollment and kind of being pleased that our predicted enrollment, and this is in the document, is predicted to be identical to this year.
Yeah.
And that's probably a conservative estimate.
Yeah.
And if you look at our enrollment projections over the next 5 to 10 years, they're fairly stable.
Okay.
And so part of the conversation has been, what are we doing to bolster our programming at the middle high school to kind of, lower that attrition rate in the 8th to 9th grade transition?
Which is where you see the big drop.
Absolutely.
Every year, yeah.
And, the good news is over the last 2 years, we've lowered that incrementally, and I think I said this, at the FinCom, it was consistently in that 34 to 35% range. And this last fiscal year, it's down to 28 now. And I said, look, I'm not doing cartwheels over 28% attrition. However, it's trending in the right direction. And I think some of the programs that we have put in place, but are also looking to expand upon at the high school, things like innovation career pathways, where kids will be out in the industry doing internships and so on, helps us to be a little more competitive with the likes of Upper Cape Tech.
And that technically doesn't cost you that much money.
It doesn't. It's kind of redeploying certain people in positions and so on. And there are some upfront costs. But to his credit, our Assistant Superintendent Dr. Dave Quinn has done some great work in getting grant funds from the State Department of Education for some of the startup costs with these programs.
Let's talk about your focus groups. I'm interested in that whole process, and as I was saying at the top of the show, if you're a non-parent in town, you want to pay attention to what's happening here, because you are soliciting input from business, from the town, from residents,
senior citizens. We've got 2 planned next month at the Cal.
What's your goal?
The goal,
objective.
and it's my goal, but it's also the school committee's goal, to kind of go out and press the flesh and solicit feedback about what do we do as a school district to get the word out, to communicate more, and what are some of the perceptions out there with regard to the school district. And Sandwich is a unique community in the sense that it's similar to the Cape Cod. It is graying. There's more folks out there.
Some people more than others.
Exactly.
I'm just saying.
I know. I can't hold on to the blonde for the life of me. I'll go onto Jarvis Street and grab a coffee at Beth's, and I'll be walking on the street, and like pretty much everybody there is my age or older. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I feel like there is a whole population that we really are connecting with.
Right.
I know that there's folks that want to connect with us as a school district. I very much know, and a lot of this, we're dovetailing it with our strategic planning process to kind of get that qualitative data. But I know the school committee also very much, this came up in last July during its retreat session, as a goal to be able to connect with different constituencies and hear different perspectives. So we're kind of doing a mix. We have one tomorrow morning with the Chamber of Commerce. We've done one with students. We'll be doing kind of the other end of the spectrum through the Sandwich Partnership with young families,
those
the partnership.
Up and coming. How are you reaching out to them?
Through direct solicitation, mass emails. We did, I want to say 4 this week through Zoom.
Oh, wow.
Where the 3 schools, plus we did the CPAC, which stands for Special Education Parent Advisory Council. And it's more of just kind of an intimate conversation. 8 simple questions about their perceptions around things like school safety, around, again, a sense of belonging and connection in the school, our curriculum, instructional strategies, and so on. And again, it's a small subset. We're also going to different stakeholders do some surveying, but I think capturing that qualitative data through a more intimate conversation is important.
And I think it's interesting, we're in this what's in it for me society. And if I don't have kids in the school system, never will, why do I care? I mean, I can translate that the better the schools are in this community.
It's the value of your home.
Exactly. So there's simple math there, but I'd be interested, and maybe down the road when the focus groups are done, I'd love to have debriefed that a little bit with you and learn what you heard. I'm particularly interested in that non-parent, that's not your direct audience.
No, it isn't. And again, I think I sent it to you in this year's budget document, as I do every year. I put a lot of performance data about how our schools are doing. And I did this thing this year that, as Joe the guy, I kind of don't like, and it's a little cringeworthy, but as Dr. Joe, the superintendent of this district, a district that I'm extremely proud of, I did it because it's like, okay, we need to celebrate our successes. But if you were to look at all of the traditional metrics of how students perform, MCAS, SATs, AP data, and now over the last 3 years, DESE, the State Department of Education, does this looking at alumni income going back to the class of 2010.
Interesting.
If you compare Sandwich to Cape and the Islands, it's not even close. In almost just about every single one of those categories, by
We're
grade
on the high
level,
end.
we're number one. Number one.
No kidding.
And the part of me as superintendent, yes, I want to celebrate it. And, there's part of me like, do you really have to kind of do the old, Boston Globe, let's do the ranking type.
Hell yeah.
But so there's that piece, and it's celebrating our successes, but I also want to be very careful that we always have to have that mindset of continuous improvement.
Yeah.
That if you're not improving, you're actually probably stagnating
Right.
or regressing.
Yeah.
So again, I think maybe people in the community know about it, maybe they don't.
Yeah.
Do I think, when I got the gig in early spring of 2022, I have a very dear friend and colleague who lives on the South Shore, and he said, great job, Joe. You do realize you're going to the premier school district on the Cape. And I said, yeah, I kind of have a sense of that.
Yeah.
So again, I know I'm going off on a terrible digression here, but if I don't have children in the school district, I still am a part of this community.
Yeah.
To me, the number one indicator of the vibrancy and the health of a community is the quality of the school districts.
Yeah.
And I'll put up our district against any other.
You were recently, or the middle high school was recently recognized.
Accreditation process.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
Yeah, and as I said in the school committee meeting, when our principal Jeannie Nelson was presenting, I throughout my career I've been on many NEASC accreditation visits. I served on their commission for 6 years in the early 2000s. When you get a final report that has 26 commendations and 3 recommendations, I'll take those odds any day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That ratio.
Yeah.
So I think it speaks to the quality of leadership, the quality of teaching.
Yeah.
It's just kind of the organizational success.
But one of those 3 was referencing building safety.
Correct.
Particularly off hours, outside of school hours. Why did they flag that?
Probably because they heard that as a concern numerous times. Realized during the 3 days that they come into district, it's actually 4 days, like 3.5. They speak to every single stakeholder group. So they'll speak with parents, they'll speak with kids, staff members, the full swath.
I don't recall getting a phone call from them. I mean, they didn't ask me my opinion.
Well, and
Next time.
horrible oversight.
Exactly.
But it's probably something that came up time and again, and I think that it is a problem. And the specific thing mentioned that I know has been brought up for many years now is the issue of the pool and the access, generally after hours when people are accessing the pool, they're coming in through the front door.
Yeah.
And it's quite a little path going through a considerable portion of the building to access the pool.
Okay.
And I think, unfortunately, there have been plans in years past about a separate entrance for the pool,
Yeah.
separate facilities for the pool. And I think that reemerged as an issue.
So when we've talked about the building conditions, and we're running long, so I want to capture this briefly. But the conditions of the school, the buildings are old. You had that recent walkthrough with the Mass School Building Authority.
Correct.
They were doing some walkthroughs. How are our? It's a question I've asked you before, but where are we today as it relates to the school buildings and safety? How do those two, do they intersect?
I think they do intersect, and through our district safety team, we are doing everything possible with the resources that we have and prioritizing those resources to ensure that things are safe. For example, one of the capital requests that we will be putting forward to the Capital Planning Committee and also to the FinCom and so on has to do with part 2 of a significant upgrade to our security camera system.
Right.
Our facilities director, Chris George, and Bryce Harper kind of have a more effective solution as far as vetting in that front vestibule at the high school. We're also looking at some other emerging technologies that we're integrating into drill planning based upon, some of the after-action analysis that have happened in, tragedies elsewhere.
Yeah.
So I think we're doing the proactive things as far as some of those long-term needs, thinking about like our athletic facilities or something like the science labs at the high school. I still think we're in this place where we're looking, and I've been working with Bud Dunham to kind of have a proposal to look at all of the school and the town buildings in whole to kind of do an analysis and what the potential costs are to maybe then put together a package to prioritize certain things. Because
scale.
Yeah, and the reality is, I think I will be long retired, hopefully in sunnier climes, well before there's a new building, a new school building in Sandwich.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the reality, but I think you have to have a reasonable approach in knowing that new school construction, particularly something like a high school, you're talking $250 to $300 million.
Yeah.
For one of those elementary schools, easily $150 million.
Right.
So what is a smaller number, but also could give us some more long-term sustainability?
Yeah. Yeah. Boy, we covered a lot.
Time flies, right?
Time flies. So I have to tell you, and I don't know if you hear anything. When I'm out in the community, I have people of the shows that I've done here on Sandwich Community Television. I have more comments about this show,
Really?
yeah, than others. People,
Are they good comments?
I didn't say that. But do you get any feedback on?
I
on
do
this?
get some feedback. It is a difficult job, and I think sometimes just human nature, but also the nature of the superintendency. You sometimes tend to perseverate on shortcomings in the work that needs to be done. And every so often, I have these little, it's almost like mana for the soul, so to speak, where I will randomly run into a parent at like Stop and Shop or wherever. And matter of fact, I think it was just last week at the post office, and like, and I had a transaction where I had to show my license, like, oh, you're Dr. Joe. Right on. You're doing a great job.
Nice.
And when you get that kind of feedback from somebody who's a complete stranger, it's like,
Yeah.
hey, I feel pretty good.
Well, it's nice that that you get the I'm really interested in what people are saying about me. You might have misunderstood my question.
Please, excuse me for not recognizing your blatant narcissism.
So when you say, you know, and they, oh, you're Dr. Joe, you should say, and you know Greg, right?
Yeah.
You recognize, you know him, right?
Yeah.
Hey, thank you for your time. Really, you fly around. You've got a lot of these focus groups. You've got a lot of
Sure.
things, a lot of demands on your time. So for you to come in here and sit with me and have this conversation, I enjoy it, and I hope it is of educational benefit.
Likewise, it's another. In all sincerity, I think the work that you do and that Sandwich Community Media does is outstanding. I think there's
Thank you.
very few communities that have this quality of production, and it's another vehicle for me to get the word out and the information, and I appreciate what
Great.
you do. And
Well,
Paula, of course.
I was going to say that Paula deserves the credit. Brian's in there working hard. So it is a great team. Joe, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
So good to see you again. I am Greg Anderson, and I will see you next time.